Hey, welcome to the Gig Life Podcast. I'm your host, Stevie Taylor. It's good to be back. I've been on a bit of a break since the start of this year. So, stoked to be back and ripping into these interviews. So, my guest today is Josh Beagley, and Josh is a iconic Australian artist, producer, DJ, and guitarist with a long storied history creating Australian funk, dance, boogie, and pop with bands like SWOOP, Confection, Professor Groove and the Booty Affair, and Coastal Elite, just to name a few. He also heads his own record label called Personal Best Records. I met Josh in his studio in Surrey Hills in Sydney. It was great to be back out doing face-to-face interviews again, and I hadn't been into Sydney City for a while, so it's changed a fair bit since last time I was in there. But anyway, enough of that. Let's rip into this interview. This is episode 132. Josh Beagley. Here we go. All right, I think we're rolling. Josh Beagley, how you going, man?
Good evening, Stevie.
How's things?
I'm all right.
Here we are. We
Here
did
we
it.
are. Yeah, took a few attempts and
Yeah.
a few cancelled gigs, so to speak. And
Yeah, gigs and COVID and all that stuff.
yeah, thanks for persisting.
Sweet as.
Yeah, I'm a hard man to track down sometimes. So.
And you've just got back from overseas. So what were you doing over there?
Oh well, I was just lucky enough to have my partner in Personal Best Records has some property in Scotland, so he likes to go over there every couple of years, and it gives us a bit of an excuse to have a European summer vacation. So just went, and my female partner was in Italy, and so we just had a bit of a Euro vacation. Probably like everyone else in Australia, bit sick of being stuck here for a couple of years.
Yeah, so that was the first trip out since COVID.
Yeah. So that was nice. It wasn't. Yeah, there's no music. It was just a holiday.
Right. So how was things music wise leading up before you went away?
Oh, I mean, it's just been up and down, really. I would say for the last couple of years. I mean, I probably haven't been doing as much live work as I get older, and COVID certainly didn't help that. But the main thing is a whole ton of the people that I have worked with for decades. Everyone's gone regional, so
Yeah, right.
very few people actually live in Sydney anymore. So it's been a bit harder to have any sort of consistent performance stuff. And
have you ever thought of pushing out regional, or
I'm lucky enough to have lots of friends living up and down the coast, so I travel
free holidays?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. I travel up and down and do lots of stuff, and I just did gigs in Byron on the weekend, and but just probably I'd love to have a crew of people in Sydney, like maybe 15, 20 years ago when we used to be able to play 2 or 3 times every weekend and really have a real consistency.
Yeah.
But who knows? There's a Roland, Professor Groove, who I've been with since I was 13 years old. We started bands back in Adelaide, and he's been living in Melbourne for 10 years. He's now back in the Blue Mountains, and we've got a whole bunch of projects about to restart. So, anything and everything can happen.
That's good. And that's more Professor Groove stuff as well?
Well, yeah, definitely some Professor Groove, and also just like lots of co-writing, because he's just a great lyricist and top-line writer, and we haven't been able to do as much as we'd like, and it's not necessarily for him to sing, but he's a bit of a genius at it, and I haven't had access to it as much as I'd like. So that's just one thing we want to, really rekindle.
Right, that's cool. And is that writing for yourself, or is that to whoever wants it, publishing?
Well, I suppose, look, with I've got a little label called Personal Best Records, which most of the acts really I have some involvement with, whether it's things that I'm actually in, like Confection or Coastal Elite, or whether it's singers that I write and produce. So I suppose we just do whatever's fit for purpose, and so a track, you don't never know really what a track idea is going to be until it is, and then you go, well, who does this suit? Is it? Is it for one of these projects, or is it for another singer? Or so there's a lot of things going on. It's just hard to trying to channel them is the tricky thing. Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's roll right back to the beginning. So you're from Adelaide, right? When did music sort of first come onto the scene for you in Adelaide? Oh, sorry, you've got a musical father, is that right?
Yeah. My dad's got a pretty rich and storied pedigree. He was was in a band called Headband in the early 70s that had I think it was a top 5 Australian album, and they were lucky enough they toured with the Rolling Stones, I think, in 1973, and Elton John in 1973, and they he was probably in his mid-20s and pretty successful. Then they broke up after one album, and he started a sort of a collective in Adelaide, in the Adelaide Hills, called the Mount Lofty Rangers, and one of his best friends at the time was Bon Scott from AC/DC. I mean, you can imagine they were just a bunch of hippies in the early 70s in the Adelaide Hills making that sort of music. So that was how I grew up with it. I had no choice. I was in the back of the van.
That's it.
And festivals like Maiponga and on tour in the back of the combi van. It was, and I probably. So I just grew up with probably quite familiar household Australian music names in my house all the time. And but to be honest, when I was younger, I was more into sport and probably study, and I didn't really think about being a musician at all until maybe, well, even I got the bug, I suppose, when I was about 13 or 14, and me and Roland had met and started to hang out. But we met through tennis. I
was going to ask what sport.
Yeah,
what was your sport? Was it tennis? Was your main sport?
I played a state tennis, and I played quite high level lacrosse, which is not a sport that's played much in New South Wales.
Right.
Played for Australia and lots of state teams when I was young, and I just lived next door to 7 tennis courts on the lacrosse oval, so I was just into it. You know? I love AFL, and I've for most of my life I've just found that a really good mutual sort of thing. I mean, most musicians don't like sport at all, and they usually find it a bit.
It's one or the other, isn't it?
Yeah, and I found it a really good coexisting thing. I kind of like. I find. I don't know. There's a human excellence in sport, which I think is in many ways is similar to what musicians are always aspiring for. And there's a creativity, like the great sports people, I think, play with a real artistic thing. People, I don't know, in AFL, people like Adam Goods or Buddy Franklin, they play like they're having fun and they're performing, and I find it. I've been addicted to it for my life, and I suppose in rugby league there's there's countless players as well that it's even though it's disciplined and years of practice and stuff, it's still entertainment, and you're still doing something with your mates, and it's I've just always found a big synchronicity in it. I love it. Yeah,
that's cool, man.
Yeah.
So did you meet Roland at school?
Yeah, well, I think probably last year of primary school. Like I've literally known him since about 11 years old. So.
Yeah, right. And was he into music at that stage?
Well, we weren't really.
Yeah.
We didn't really know.
Until you got to 13.
Yeah, until then what happened was he actually, his parents are academics, and he went over to San Francisco, I suppose he was 13, 14 or something, and for whatever reason we sort of kept in touch, wrote a few letters and basically I started playing guitar and he started playing bass at almost the identical time. And he, freakily enough, his first bass teacher was a guy called Willie Weeks, who was
no way.
Who was on Donny
He's one of my favourites.
Yeah. And so I didn't even, he's going, I'm just learning this stuff. And I would have sent him a cassette of Donny Hathaway live. Because
that's one of my all-time favourite albums, that.
Me too.
Yeah, and that bass solo and everything is everything.
Yeah,
it's something else.
And he's sort of gone, that's who I'm getting bass lessons from. And at that time we weren't really doing, that wasn't really the sort of stuff we were doing, but it was, and I didn't even realise the significance of this till quite a bit later. It's like, hang on, wasn't your first teacher Winnie Willie,
Yeah.
And so we just started sending each other things across the Atlantic. And when he came back, basically he came back with like a treasure trove of cassettes. It was all the first hip-hop stuff. And we sort of had this little collective, two-man collective in Adelaide, middle-class white boys listening to Getting High on old school hip-hop and obscure disco. And that's, we just had like a little two-man team. And it started there. And to this day, we're still best friends and absolutely addicted to it. And I'm very lucky to have that relationship and that partnership in music.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, we often talk about it's very rare for it's what we're talking. It's a 40-year friendship. So it's like someone's in your corner the whole time that you can. It gives you strength.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of those early bands then, and then then we'll get to.
Yeah. Well, I suppose, we started doing some gigs in Adelaide when we were 15 or whatever, and we were trying to, probably like most kids, just trying to combine all the things we liked into the one melting pot. And so it was the stuff my parents were listening to, and it was so it was everything from things like doing a funk version of Get Off My Cloud by the Rolling Stones, to trying to do That Girl by Stevie Wonder. Like, I don't know, it was a very mixed band to sort of new wavy, punky stuff. But it basically just gave us gave us the fuel to the fire. And then both of us, he went to ANU, Canberra Uni, for a while, and I was at Adelaide, and we sort of gave it a year or two off, and then we sort of just said, let's both go to Sydney Uni and we'll see what happens. So I suppose it was probably about 85, 86. My parents were living here, and we all just did arts degrees at Sydney Uni and started SWOOP. And it was we just had an ambition to try and do white boy funk dance music, and I suppose Wham had just started, and it was, they can do it, and Blondie had done Rapture, and it was like, let's give it a go. Duran Duran were trying to, influenced by Chic, and so we just started doing that, and
you can certainly hear that early hip hop in the style and the lyrics and the rap of those early SWOOP albums, eh?
Yeah,
definitely.
He's got Roland's, his parents are academics, and he's one of the smartest people you'll ever meet. But he's got a encyclopedic memory for lyrics and words, and if he hears something once, that's there. And so he's always been fantastic with wordplay, and I suppose that's a key component, isn't it? Like Bob Dylan, or you've got to find an angle and an edge, and those things just don't come from nowhere. You have to you have to have knowledge and be widely read and talk to people and have kind of playfulness with words.
Yeah.
And I suppose the other people, I keep going back to Mick Jagger, who I think is an incredible lyricist and always had his lyrics were fun, even though they might have been serious, dark, but there was always a twist and they were always really influenced by black music, or whether it was blues, soul early on, disco in the 70s. We always thought that they did a good job of trying to sound like the Rolling Stones, but reflecting the current trends that they were into.
Gotcha.
And yeah, when SWOOP started in Sydney, we the first thing we did was we were really into like Washington go-go music. I don't know if many people are aware of that, but it was a sort of an offshoot funk thing that was really just localised in Washington, and they have big bands, 16, 17 people, 4 or 5 percussionists, brass section, sort of came from the marching bands in colleges.
Yep.
And this is basically, well, until Reagan came in, music education was compulsory in America. So,
wow, really?
Yeah. So you had this is why there was just an incredible all those 70s funk bands.
Yep.
With the musicianship is amazing because all of them studied to a high level through high school. They had music departments that were fully equipped, and this is a kind of a bit of a socio-economic political thing that people don't really think about.
Yeah.
And one of Reagan's horrible Reaganomic things was one of the first things to suffer this funding cuts was music education. And so probably the last generation of people that got that free, incredible, with people like Prince, all that coterie of Minneapolis people.
Yeah, wow.
They all knew each other from school music classes. And Washington Go-Go, again, which was around the same time, all of these kids were in marching bands. They'd play at the football games with the horn sections and the marching drums and stuff. And you could probably equate in many ways the emergence of, well, the precedence of rap with the lack of music education, because the black kids didn't have the technical instrument mastery, and they went to machines and rather than learning how to sing, they used rap as a form of communication. And you can sort of chart the difference. And so musicianship in many ways has arguably been sort of forced out of a lot of American, funk-related music, black funk, soul. And anyway, long story short, sorry, yes, we were really obsessed with this Washington go-go music, which was just incredibly localised. It was sort of these young kids doing really tribal versions of P-funk and bits of hip-hop. And we just loved it. And so we started just covering their songs, and we said, oh, well, we'll have 3 percussionists and we'll get 2 drummers and we'll...
Yep.
So one of the drummers, one of the people you said you've had on the podcast, Terapai Richmond, who's I think arguably the best drummer I've definitely played with, and the most natural talent. And we auditioned him, and when he was about 17, and we just put on one of these records and said, "Can you play that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." And then we had another guy called Lucius Borich, who's in a band called Cog. He showed up straight after him, and he was incredible too. And we said, "Well, what about both of you do it?"
Right.
We didn't really know. It was just sort of pragmatic. And
I didn't realise Lucius was in SWOOP.
Oh, we're very, very early incarnation. Just did some gigs, and we like I say, we used to do these wild parties with 14, 15, 16 people.
Right.
So anyway, that took a while to. It was really fun. It was sort of the emergence of those big dance parties. And we only put one record out, which is pretty hard to find, but it's called Back to Back, which is one of the compilation. I could probably source it for you. But and then we sort of stopped for a while for study, and Roland had a cycle accident which put him out of action for a while, and that's a whole other thing. then probably after a year, we sort of said, "Oh, well, are we going to do this?" And we refocused a bit and sort of started the SWOOP that ended up being on record. But no one was into it. Like, it was, no labels were interested, and Australian rock was just running rampant through the pubs and the clubs, and so we kind of had to forge our own path, and we had to start our own label to release things, and we had to book our own gigs, and then.
Was that always the case with SWOOP right through? Or?
Well, pretty much. We were very, very independent. And we've a guy called Jules Normington, who had a label called Phantom Records, who basically did punk, but he really loved what we were doing, and we were quite ambitious at the time, and nothing was happening. And he said, "Well, let's just do something. We'll start a new label together." And we did it, and put a couple of things out, and did some really ghetto kind of record launches. We just book a hall or whatever, and pack it out and leave it a mess, and then it just started to work, and we put out more things, and suddenly we got booked on TV shows, and we were playing big. Well, we were playing all around Australia in bigger venues, and I suppose we kind of did a version of using our influence of Australian rock and that kind of gig hard and performance thing, and tried to put that into the funk disco side of things, which probably didn't translate so well to Australian audience, which were probably pretty Anglo back then, and that's really kind of how the SWOOP sound was. It was a kind of a fusion of the music we loved from the black music side, and pulling in that sort of Australian rock, hard work, put on a show, climb the PA, crowd surf, bring that energy of which I think is an incredible legacy of Australian music, and try and give some showmanship and some. Well, just make it a bit of a melting pot, I suppose. That was really the thing.
Yeah. So I guess we'll call it the big hit, I suppose, was Apple Eyes.
Yeah.
Right. So I was curious, because I've been listening to some SWOOP the last few days.
Yeah.
And prepare to come and talk to you. And I was first made aware of SWOOP. I came out to Australia at the end of 94.
Oh, yeah.
So 95, 96, I started getting into the Sydney music scene.
Yeah.
And
where from?
I'm from New Zealand.
Yeah, but
from Masterton, which is it's in the Wairarapa, so it's Wellington-ish region.
Yep.
And there was the shows like Hey Hate Saturday, and there was bands on TV shows which didn't really happen in my day in New Zealand.
Doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, so I think the first time I saw you guys was a performance of Apple Eyes.
Yep.
Fuck, who's this? This is awesome, the funk guitar and just the funky drums, and I hadn't heard anything like it before. So I'm curious, like that song Apple Eyes, when you wrote that, because as soon as it starts playing, you've got your guitar riff, and then it comes in with that. It's that song's go right from the start, right? And it's hooky and it's catchy and all the little vocal catches in it. When you wrote that song, did it feel like that was going to be the hit?
It had a kind of a complicated start. The bass player at the time, Alex Hewitson, had we were sort of all throwing song ideas in for what was the second album, and he had a little demo of the do 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 do, kind of the basic chord things.
Yep.
And Roland going, I've sort of got something over that, and it sounded a bit like OJ's like, get on board, get on the love train and ride it. And So that was just the kernel, and then that sort of stuck around for a while, and then we were sort of a bit stuck in the studio. Said, "Oh, we've got that idea," and then we started playing around with it. And me and the producer, a guy called Ashley Goodell, who was we were doing a lot of stuff in the studio without the band.
Yep,
just sort of the way it worked. Like we wanted to do it all, but people weren't available. So me and him sort of really dug in, and then I sort of mucked around and turned the distortion pedal on and went down. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool, you know. And then we sort of kind of did a rock version of this sort of dinky idea.
Yep.
And then I remember saying to Roland, "Oh man, it's a bit daggy, the lyric. Can you come up with something better?"
Mm.
And he went away and he came back with the sort of psychedelic lyric idea.
Yep.
And when we tried that, it was like, oh, that's pretty good. And then there was all the other stuff was just reflections of what we listened to, which was Sly Stone and Parliament. So that, like you say, that Moog line was because we were just listening to P-Funk and that kind of and G-Funk. And so let's put a Moog on there. And the guitar solo was basically a nod to the Isley Brothers.
Yeah, right.
And the outro goes all flangey at the end, and we literally did that in mastering because that sounded like Sly Stone, putting two tapes. Yeah. So it was it was a combination of all sorts of interesting things, and probably, and you got the Roland with his sort of more funk approach, and then Fiona with a more delicate, melodic type. So it really was, again, it was a melting pot. It was a whole bunch of everything, and we arranged it really well, and it's 3.5 minutes of.
It's a great song.
Just hooks everywhere.
It hooks everywhere. Yeah. That's right. And you know how there's you go through your life and you listen to songs and you always think that the lyrics are certain lyrics.
Yeah.
And then you find out that it's actually not.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to like I knew the song was called Apple Eyes, but I used to think, why is it called Apple Eyes? Apple Eyes is not even in the lyrics, because I used to think that first line to the chorus was up all night.
Oh yeah, right.
Up all night drinking strawberry wine.
That's probably better.
And then of course you find out it's Apple Eyes. Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah. So that was on the Woxo.
Yeah.
So where did that? Because that's a really trippy sort of idea, isn't it?
Again, we were just obsessed with
psychedelic
George Clinton, and the way he had those things like the placebo funkadelic versus the placebo syndrome, and he used to create these kind of mythologies around Parliament, funkadelic, and the spaceships came
and all
down,
that,
and we would just listen to it like all the time, and it wasn't like a conscious decision. It was just
just happened.
It was just the stuff we were into. Like, let's do stuff like that, and we did a comic book, and we made ourselves out to be space freaks, and it just seems a bit weirder because no one else doing Australian rock was doing that. So it was a little bit. But that was we were touring a lot, and you're in the Tarago, and it's. Music sounds good before and after gigs, and you're sort of stuck there with your people, and we were just playing those Sly Stone, There's a Riot Going On album, and Funkadelic versus Placebo Syndrome, just all that stuff over and over and over, and it just seeped in.
Ingrained, seeped in, yeah. Awesome. So SWOOP ended about 99, is that right? Did I read that right?
Yeah, and then
So what was the catalyst for that?
Oh, we were a bit of a soap opera. So
okay.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, because we were trying to. We were a 7-piece band, so it was quite unwieldy. So
we had
a percussionist, female singer, keyboard player, guitar, like so. Financially, it was not very viable.
Yep.
because it's just every gig you've got 7 people plus road crew plus.
Yep.
So we were sort of touring as though we were a much bigger band than we were.
Right.
But also having 7 people, you're a little community. So there was lots of interrelationship stuff that got. Roland was in a relationship with Fiona for several years, and then he wasn't, and then she was in a relationship with other people in the band. Okay. It just got difficult, and it just hit a point where we just sort of. We never actually called it. Like, I mean, we've actually got some new SWOOP stuff that might come out.
Yeah.
But,
awesome.
but it just got too hard, and we lost the support of the record company, who Mushroom disintegrated because for a lot of reasons. But they essentially were in the process of selling the whole business to festivals, so they weren't investing in any of their bands. Okay. No one knew this. So
a lot of bands getting shelved.
Yeah,
and all that sort of stuff.
So it was just really frustrating, and we just sort of called it for the time being, and then it never really resumed. It was a shame because if we'd stuck at it, probably we were definitely on the verge of going better. You know, we toured Japan, we had a top 5 single there. I think it was on the verge of being released in the UK. It had been in TV shows, and it was. But it's really hard to keep 7 people on the road, and unless things go really well, bands are kind of for people in their 20s.
Right.
It just gets harder when you get a bit older, and you got to pay rent, you got relationships, and there's demands, and and being in a band is an inherently illogical thing to do. Yeah. It challenges all. I mean, it's why it's eternally fascinating to kids, because it's like a fantasy life.
Exactly.
Yeah. So everyone sort of wants to do it. Like, what do you mean? They just like it's when you're young, it just seems like the most incredible thing. Yeah. And in some ways, it is. It's an unreal existence. Yeah. But there's a point where we all just saw it, and with that Beatles Get Back thing. Yeah. Not that I'm comparing us to the Beatles, but
of course,
but you can just see they're all 29 years old, and suddenly they've got 1-year-old kids, and they've been together for 10 years, and they don't like each other very much anymore, and they're arguing, and it's just
turning up in their different posses and different cars, and
and that's what we were like. We had separate Taragos because we were getting like it just got a bit silly. We're like we're not successful enough to be doing this, and we don't really. So we just sort of stopped, and then Roland and I were like, well, we're a bit bored. Let's just do some gigs around the hood, and we just jokingly made up a band name called Professor Groove and the Booty Affair. Like it was literally just a joke.
Really?
Yeah, it was sort of, and we just really the idea was let's just play some covers without any of the pressures of SWOOP and without having to do originals and light shows and road crew, and let's just play the songs that we like. And we started doing we just started doing Sunday nights at a place called Kinsella's just down the road here. And we all sat down.
Yep.
And we didn't care. And we just said, this is what we're going to do. And we'd learn songs and do songs that people were like, we don't care what the demand is. We're just going to do what we like.
Yep.
And it ended up being a really successful thing, and
became an institution, really, didn't
it? But like sort of what I was saying back at the start of the thing was, I'm still doing music with my best friend, so we just did whatever we like. Let's do Eddie Money song, Baby Hold On To Me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hey guys, we're doing this on Sunday. Learn it.
Yep.
No rehearsal, let's go. And then we'd do that for 3 months. We're going to do this song, I Want to Know If It's Good For You by Funkadelic, like the deep things that people wouldn't necessarily dance to, but we just set ourselves little challenges.
Yeah.
We did a lot of James Brown stuff, which we didn't like when we were younger, but we just got deep into it and got into the discipline of the way those tracks were made.
Yep.
And like when I say we got obsessive about one guitar does this.
Okay.
For 11 minutes.
Yep.
The other guitar does that.
Yep.
For 11 minutes.
Yep.
And don't fuck around.
And that's it.
And the keyboard player doesn't do anything until James says, go. And then you play until he says stop.
Yeah.
And then don't noodle.
Yeah.
Because if you do, we'll shut the whole thing down and embarrass you. So we just sort of we've just found fun in that. And also, and then you work out this it's powerful. If everyone does their job and you're on the same page.
That's a trip, man.
And then suddenly you go, oh, actually, we actually sound really good.
Yeah.
And that gives you confidence. And then as you say, Professor Groove, we probably did a few thousand gigs.
Yep.
Around Sydney. And the only shame of it is that we didn't record enough. We were just sort of enjoying doing those things, and we weren't. I mean, there's a live album. We eventually did a recorded album, but there's a lot of stuff we should have done more. But that's just the way it goes. Yeah.
I said to you before we started recording, it was my wife that put me onto Professor Groove in the Booty Affair, because through her school friends and stuff, they used to come out and watch you guys play. And I think the first time I saw you play would have been the Basement. You played the Basement?
Yeah, a lot of basement gigs.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that would have been the first time. And then the second time was at Pier 1. There's that
Harbourside Brasserie.
Harbourside Brasserie, that's right. And I'm not sure. I don't think you played that night. Phil Sobrano was playing guitar. That's the first time I'd seen Phil.
I missed a couple, but he was a big part of the early years, and because he was in I'm Talking with his sister Kate Sobrano, and they were doing disco funk as well, and he was living in Melbourne, so he moved to Sydney and sort of coagulated and why don't you do it? And Phil's a fantastic guitar player.
Yeah, I've had Phil on the podcast. We talked about all this.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, and he's super funny, and he's like an alpha personality like Roland, and so they'd almost compete for attention at gigs, but we had the same thing. We just had this, like, me and him just sat next to each other, and we would just lock in. You do that, I'll do that, and let's go. Yeah, it was super fun. He eventually moved back to Melbourne, and we mutated and kept on going. But he was a big part of the early Professor Groove stuff. Yeah.
And the first time I'd ever seen Kelvin was at that Harbourside Brasserie.
Yeah.
Gig. And Kelvin's been on the podcast as well.
Yeah, he's
brother.
He's well, obviously, apart from just being an incredible human and a fantastic drummer and such a joyous person to be around, that sort of stuff. When we were doing that stuff, and we were just deep into this, like I say, the kind of discipline, long, like just don't miss a beat. Yeah, he got it like no other drummer ever. He would just sit there. Yep, and we used to have this thing. I'd sort of sit at the back. We had the bass at the back and Carvin, and we'd just sit there looking at each other, going, we just power through. Yep. Because those gigs, we used to call them marathons of funk. They'd be 3 hours, 3.5 hours. Yeah. And we took great delight in just having that hypnotic, consistent funk. And no one's ever been able to do it like Calvin. Yeah. Terrapai's an incredible drummer, but his patience is
I understand.
Different.
I understand.
Calvin could just sit on that thing. Yeah. And again, it's just we were just so confident with that groove. Yep.
And I picked up on that too at that gig, and I told Kelvin this in the podcast. It was one of the things that really, got me. Was that you didn't play a fill, you just played the groove. Yeah. And that was it.
We'd have. Every now and then, when someone else came in, we'd like, man, if you do a drum fill, we'll fine you. We won't pay you. We'll stop the gig.
Yeah. We'll embarrass you.
And people like, what do you? Yeah, whatever. And it's like, if you disrupt the groove,
that's it.
It's a thing. And
yeah.
And you only realise how good Calvin is when you don't have him.
Yeah, I understand.
And people didn't hit the kick drum like with the same authority and like just this consistency. Like he was like going to a dance club. He just had this pulsing funk that if it wasn't there, we felt like at half speed.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, it really was. It is. He's an incredible thing, and he's. Also, I mean, it gets complicated because Roland and I, we wanted, we were loose all get go back there and lots of, lots of drinking, substance, partying.
Yeah.
But we knew that we were providing the entertainment and the
colour, so to speak.
But had to be built on
that foundation.
And so the bass, the drums, the keys, everything else had to be like locked in order for Roland in particular to be able to do this thing. Because if you follow in the wrong way, it mucks it up. And now, in all honesty, we haven't had that lock for a long time, and we'd love to get back to it. But you've got to play together a lot.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's the sort of modern day Professor Groove like? Because you was one of the last gigs you did, was that the final gig at El Sol before they closed it? Yeah, which I was going to try and get down to, but
yeah. Well, weirdly enough, we've been playing on and off down at the Cronulla for I suppose well over 20 years, and Brass Monkey and El Sol, and something about surf culture and the kids. There's a certain wildness, and they just love us for some reason, and so we've done a series of incredible gigs over the years down there. But well, like I say, towards the start of things, it's been made more difficult when you have to get different people for different gigs, and you don't have that huge repertoire and this kind of consistent discipline to sort of draw upon. But that's just been a function of the world. People hadn't been able to rehearse. People have moved away. So you'll get together for a gig and it's great fun. It's amazing, but it probably doesn't have the power of those harbourside or basement gigs where we were literally all aligned. But so we did a lot of stuff there. We've released a few tracks. We've got a whole bunch of things that sound really great, which I'm trying to finalise and put together, but I just hadn't wanted to put them out unless Professor was in town and could do a video or do some interviews, and so that's just happening now. And the other thing that we're looking at doing is, for a while now, me and him have been really into we call it country funk. I don't know if it's things, everything from Glenn Campbell doing Wichita Lineman to the band to Little Feet to Atlanta Rhythm Section. So Bonnie Raitt, all sorts of things. But we'd sit around listening to things and quite often we end up in this little Southern groove type thing.
Yeah.
So I've literally we've just pitched a thing called Professor Groove's Southern Nights. So
cool.
We're going to do some gigs playing that stuff. So basically just the music that we're into, and we haven't done it yet, but we'll probably get a pedal steel guitar player and some backing vocals and just try and get that 70s Southern groove thing.
Right. So what will you do rhythm section wise then?
Well, Terapai's our main guy at the moment, but he lives in Byron. So and Calvin would be the other one, but he's been doing this gig at Hubert's night and day. So it's been. So we will try and start with Terapai, and the other bass player that we've been working with mainly for years is Michael DiFrancesco, who's touch sensitive, is his sort of commercial name. He's just the best. So that would be our dream team. And then on keys, probably Harry Sutherland, who's we've been doing lots of writing and playing with for the last several years. So, I mean, this is the problem. It depends on everyone being available.
Yeah, gotcha.
But that's the ideal, and that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, cool.
And probably write and record and release some stuff in that vein as well. Hopefully.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's what we're working on.
Can't wait.
Yeah,
awesome. All right, so while Professor Groove, that stuff was going on, obviously that wouldn't have sustained. Or were you playing enough for that to be the only thing you were doing, or when did you start getting into the DJing and the producing and? Oh
well, yeah, that's basically after SWOOP. Really, there just wasn't much income, so some people have been involved with our old manager and a friend of his that was working at MGM, who were the label that was putting stuff out, were like, well, let's do a label, and rather than focus on the band that you might be in, why don't you do lots of bands or work with lots of people?
Yep.
And it's a pretty simple idea.
Yeah.
And harder to execute, but that's what happens. And we started a little label called One Stop Funk Shop. And that's probably when Confection started. It was the same thing, which is, well, just why don't you just make some music like the stuff you listen to, which was kind of 80s funk, like Evelyn King and Janet Jackson and stuff, and ended up hooking up with Juanita, and we made that record, and that went all right. But yeah, One Stop Funk Shop released stuff by Don Dollar, who's now Sergio, who's become really successful, and yeah, we did a few things. It's just I'm not a great businessman, but it was nice to do that. And then that evolved after a while into Personal Best Records, which was really just the same thing, which is just let's do a label that enables me to put out music with the people I'm working with. And it's to greater or lesser success, but it's what I'm passionate about. I still love doing it, and it gives me an opportunity to get people together and record and write, and rather than just nothing happening with it, at least things can be available and to come out. And
did that step up a bit during COVID then? During lockdown stuff?
Well, the problem was it was getting really good before COVID.
Okay.
And then that just pulled everything away.
Okay.
But the one good thing about COVID was the room you're sitting in now.
Yep.
It was like, my girlfriend wasn't living here, and I was like, oh well, if I'm locked in here, I might as well lock in and just got all the synths out and just build a synth wall, and it turned on. It just said I'm going to learn how to use a different drum machine, and I basically wrote an entire Confection album in a month or two, and then when we were allowed to see anyone, I called up Juanita and said, I've got 10 tracks.
Yeah.
Come and sing them.
You just mentioned your synth wall. So in here at the moment, there's a Prophet 5 and there's a Rhodes.
Yeah, it's a Memory Moog undercover there.
Oh, yep.
That's probably the king of synths. What have we got? There's an M1, there's a Whirly, there's a Roland D50. Oh, sorry, Siri. There's a Roland D50 underneath the table here.
There's an SSL module.
Yeah, SSL modules, a Yamaha RX5 drum machine. There's a Simmons claptrap. There's a 808. Yeah, it's
cool, man.
I like all the toys.
Yeah. Is there? This is a question I was going to ask a bit later, but is there one favourite there? Is there one favourite bit of equipment?
Well, probably. I've only probably the Memory Moog, I think, is the funkiest synth that's ever been made.
Yep.
It's noisy, it's a bit unwieldy. But so the Prophet 5 is probably the one. But
it's a bit of a duck's nuts.
It's just on so many of the records that I love.
Yeah.
I'd never had one. So all through SWOOP, and I always had other synths.
Yeah, right.
So I only bought that last year, and it's historical, but it's, you can hear Prince, you can hear so many reminders of great moments past.
You could just lose yourself in that, eh?
Yeah. But it is a bit like, choosing between your children. Because that's the reason why people are like, why do you have so many toy pianos in your house? Or
why not?
Well, because they all provide a different flavour. And I've got a few guitars, but I'm not really an obsessive guitar player.
Okay.
But I do like the sound of drum machines and synths. I can get a bit more into that, I think.
Mm. So just on your guitar playing, then you're listening to the SWOOP albums the last few days. Those. Who were the funk guitarists at the time that you were listening to, or did you actually zone in on the fact that that particular guitarist had a name, or did you just hear the sound and just try and replicate the sound, or did you work out who that guitar player is and study?
No, I'm a bit random with it. Like me and Roland would listen to. There's a band called Haircut 100, who you probably have never heard of. No. Most people, they were like an 80s English. They were sort of doing a similar idea that we were, kind of white boys trying to play funk, jazz funk, and they had a guitar player called Nick Haywood, and he did that kind of that scratchy rhythm thing.
Yep.
And I probably heard them when I was 14 or something, and that was like, what's that? Because that sounds amazing.
Mm.
And so my first influence was trying to sound like him, because he had this just magnificent right-hand funk feel. And there's a whole album called Pelican West where every track has got this, and that was how I developed my right-hand thing.
Yeah.
Now, clearly there's, Nile Rodgers and the obvious, and the James Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember what the James Brown guitar, I was Catfish Collins, but I was more track by track, and then we would just learn a song to play, and then you learn it. I never really went down the rabbit hole with guitar players. I was a bit more pragmatic.
Yeah, gotcha.
I love the guy from Kool and the Gang who does those kind of those catchy, dunk, 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 sort of catchy lines.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm a bit random with guitar.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that answers the question. Yeah. So Coastal Elite, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was really just like the previous stories. I just went through a big phase of listening to lots of sort of yacht rock, Doobie Brothers, Michael McDonald, Jackson Brown, Carly Simon, and stuff that when I was younger was just not cool. It was, particularly when I was a teenager, which is when you really sort of form your musical influences. Like that stuff was just, or that soft rock, West Coast stuff was just, that was what music was rebelling against.
Yeah, right.
Punk new wave. That was.
Yeah.
Those long hair, beard, denim shirt, smooth, noodling Fender Rhodes. That was the enemy.
Yeah, right.
So even though you kind of grow up with that stuff in the background, it was never something that I was particularly into. And then it's not like a light bulb or anything, because music's a complicated thing. But there was a point where I suddenly realised I was just listening to lots of that stuff, and I thought it would just be really cool to do something somewhat, again, not exactly, but it's strongly influenced by it.
Yep.
And at the time, I didn't really have any. Most of the people I was regularly working with went around. So I had a bunch of tracks with Michael DeFrancesco, who we discussed, but he was away a lot touring with Touch Sensitive. So, and Roland Professor was in Melbourne, and Juanita was doing other stuff. And so you just started reaching out to some other people, and that Shawbreak song that we were discussing earlier, that's a guy called Andrew Bruce who does some vocals on that. And
so who's playing bass then?
That's Michael DeFrancesco.
Oh, it is Michael.
Yeah,
okay, right.
Yep. We've made a ton of music. We haven't put enough of it out.
Yep.
And that's another project called Crime Wave, which hopefully is kind of see the light of day pretty soon.
Cool.
But so we've great musical compadres. We've done a lot of stuff, lots of stuff. He's been a huge influence on the way I play and listen to music, and he's a synth master, and he's the best bass player. So I think basically, him and I were just going, let's do some. I mean, yacht rock's a very generic term, but essentially it was that kind of less aggressive, a little bit white, but not exclusively. It's like white soul music.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah,
and Coastal Elite was just I was watching lots of American politics at the time, and sort of the early Trump era, and it was, everyone was just arguing about everything, and those goddamn Coastal Elites, and I just thought that's just a great name for a band to do that sort of stuff. And
yeah.
So, like most things, it starts out as a bit of a joke and a bit of a kind of a weird concept, and then it seemed, I just thought it sounded like that's what Australia is. We are coastal elites. That's exactly what Australia is. We've got 6 cities dotted on the coastline with a 20 million miles of interior that people don't really want to live in.
Yeah.
And so the more I mucked around with the idea of Coastal Elite, the more it just seemed to be something really good. And then this graphic designer we worked with called Cameron Baird came up with this fantastic graphics with the flags and the nautical thing, and it just felt like it fit.
And then the promo, the band shots. You all get your own little
exactly.
little
Everyone's
names.
got yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a bit like some of those 70s black funk albums where they'd all have a little square, Josh Aquarius plays guitar, and everyone's sort of trying to pose for the photo, and so.
Yeah.
But Coastal Elite now really it's a bit of a look. I mean, it's really just no one really knows about it, and it's. I'd love it to be more popular because I'm really proud of it. I think it's really. I think what we've done is really good.
Yeah, so do I. Agree.
But it got really badly affected by COVID. We had some awesome gigs lined up with Vivid that would have been big and would have helped, and so it's just another opportunity for me to work with people from my friends, my musical friends and family, and not be stuck in the story sort of keeps circling around. Bands are difficult, and probably for people in their 20s, and so I'm interested in new forms of groups where the commitment isn't the same, but you still get the enjoyment. So I'm trying to kind of provide a framework where people can come in, do a song or two without stressing them out, going,
there's no commitment.
I'm in a band called Coastal Elite, and I'm
gotcha.
But obviously, if something goes well, then they can go, oh, hey, I did a track with
Coastal Elite.
Yeah. So it's about as simple as that, and I wish I put more music out, and I've got a ton about to come out. Doing a track with my niece, Holiday Sidewinder. We've just done a cover of, well, not the Carly Simon song "Why," which is literally be out in about 5 weeks.
This will be out on your label?
This will be out on Personal Best, yeah. I've been doing stuff with Juanita Tippins from Confection. We've got new Confection coming out.
Cool.
New singer called Leroy Jones, who's been singing around Sydney. He's just unbelievably great. I'm so excited about the stuff I've got with him.
What kind of singer is he? What kind of style, sorry?
Well, I'll play some off air, but he's just got a proper 80s funk sort of. He's a Islander, but I don't think he sings like an Islander, and I'm not saying that in a good or a bad way.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
He's got a real kind of punchy. He reflects the music he grew up with, and so he came over with Juanita one night for a session, and he goes, "I've got all those records," and and so he's into lots of the records that I was, and he's new, like he's 29 or something, but he's trying to find his feet, and same thing. I just said, well, you can feature on a Coastal Elite song, and we'll just start that way, and he's amazing. Like, he's just one of the best Australian voices that we've ever heard. So I'm really
watch the space.
Really excited about that. He's just great, and got a Ricky Nefo. I don't know. Yeah. So Ricky's on a track, and those two. So the generations keep evolving, and I'm just trying to tap into great people who and like Ricky Nefo is really into we've only done one song together, but we talked about doing this country funk stuff, that kind of 70s soul that's bordering on Nashville and Linda. So there's lots of stuff, and new stuff with Moody Beach, who I've collaborated with quite a bit, and lots of stuff with Professor, lots of stuff with Juanita. Florian, who we've put some records out with. There's a lot to come. It's just it's got to knock them out and get them released.
Awesome, exciting, man.
Yeah,
I can't wait.
I think so. I mean, that's the great thing about music, is as depressing as it can seem sometimes, because it's hard to get noticed, and
there's so much of it,
and it's hard work.
We were talking about it before.
I just do find it endlessly stimulating, and there's nothing funner than making music that, first of all, you enjoy the process, and you when the person you're writing with or recording with sings or plays something incredible, it's just such an exciting thing. And then when you get the chance to be able to finally put that out, it's as exciting as when I was 12 or 13 or 5 or 25. It's an endlessly renewable resource, I think. So, and that's the one thing I'm enjoying now, is just constantly trying to keep looping people I've worked with and back into the, into making records.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
Man, this has been cool. I'm really excited. I can't wait to hear this stuff.
Yeah, well, I'll send you a couple of preview things.
That'd be great. Yeah. And then, I'll do everything my end to, once that music comes, to push it out.
That'd be great. Much appreciated.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Josh Beagley, thanks so much for chatting with me today, man. It's
absolute pleasure, Stevie. Thanks for herding me in.
Herding you.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, man. All right. Catch you soon.
No worries. Cheers.
See you, bud.